Save you.
I'm Eddie Robinson, and in this episode, exploring fatherhood through surrogacy. Just months before my father, Edward Sr., passed away, I made a promise to him that he'd be a grandfather someday. But when you're an only child, single, no spring chicken either, attracted to men, limited funds, and you want to uphold your dad's legacy, affordable options to start a family of my own become non-existent.
It's a sad supply and demand, and you are being squeezed out, as is every other American who wants to be an intended parent.
Yeah, I see you. Meet the folks making this surrogacy journey possible. My surrogate, Whitney Crenshaw, with special guest mental health expert Joey Guzman-Cuffle and public policy and health expert Barbara Colura. Yeah, I feel you. We hear you. I see you. First, the news. You're listening to I See You. I'm Eddie Robinson. What you're hearing in the background is a pretty significant spot for yours truly on a bridge overpass in a Brooklyn neighborhood high above the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. You see, back in 2007, I was thinking about scaling the fence and jumping off this overpass into traffic below. I had just come out as gay over the phone to my parents who lived in Mississippi. They shut me out and stopped talking to me for nearly a year because they were so angry that their only son was attracted to men. I was working at a sports talk radio station in New York where homophobic remarks were blurted out on a daily basis. I was in my 30s and I was ready to die. But I decided not to jump. Why? Because I was more concerned about the family who'd hit me and how much trauma I'd cause in their lives. Well, my dad died unexpectedly back in 2018. Months before his death, he and I had a private conversation, and I asked him what he really thought about me being attracted to other men. Well, he told me that he worried a lot about me and didn't want me to be alone. But later in that same chat, I promised him that his love for me would live on and that he'd be a grandfather. His eyes lit up, and he loved that concept. But you see, I'm a man, and I can't have children. And the existing insurance laws have no inclusive definitions for what's meant by infertility. Now, if I were a woman and became pregnant, health benefits would kick in. But I'm denied benefits. It's as if I'm being penalized for being a man. And the costs are mind-blowing. Fertility's a big business with very little federal oversight. And it's caused a lot of financial strain on me. Why are there so few options for financial relief? A gay rugby buddy of mine in his mid-50s recently told me, "I regret not doing what you're doing and being a dad." You know, I cried and I thought to myself, how many other gay men of a certain age feel that way? So with this episode, I hope to challenge a stereotype that says usually black men steer clear from being a father to a child. You know, I've seen those dances men do when they learn from TV host Maury Povich that they are not the father.
You are not the father.
But here I am, willing to move heaven and earth to bring attention to surrogacy for gay men, as I struggle to create a family of my own. We begin this episode with a candid conversation with my mom, Stephanie Robinson, who is recently visiting me in Houston. She lives in Mississippi. This section does contain some language that may be offensive to some listeners. We're a little less than 20 weeks out. August is the month when this newborn baby is due. How excited are you to finally being a grandmother? What does this mean to you?
It's been a long time coming, but finally, I'm going to be a grandmother, and I'm very excited about it. Got a little bit of mixed emotions because Eddie's daddy passed away in 2018. Now, he was the really grandfather type, and he was very excited about having a grandson. You noticed I said grandson because that's really what I always thought, that the firstborn should be a boy. And yeah, I am very excited about being a grandmother, but it's going to be different because I'm the only grandparent. Eddie's daddy was just fantastic with children. He loved children. He's always the one that takes them out to ride the bike, take them out to play the golf, take them out to swim. Mommy don't do none of that. So That's going to be different for me. He was the athletic type, and he always loved children also. And that was one thing that we were really excited about him retiring, and to be able to do things together like that, and especially with grandkids. We've had a really good time with my little nieces and nephew, but having a grandchild of your own is going to be the best thing that could ever happen, I'm sure.
Do you remember the kind of kid that I was growing up in Macomb, Mississippi?
We never had any problem with you, even when you were little. To me, you were really just a perfect child. Of course, I never really did a whole lot of getting up with you at night. That's another reason I'll miss your dad, because he was really the one that got up with you at night. But yeah, you were an exceptional kid. The only thing that I really, really remember about you, you had to have your music. I mean, from the very beginning of seeing the turntable go around, you would love to hold records in your hand, and you would love to listen to music. You liked to dance too. And it didn't matter what kind of music, it was any kind of music.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't know if you recall this, but I recall one Christmas you asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said a brother. And I couldn't remember what you answered back, but I always thought that it had something to do with our family being able to afford another child. You know, I remember my dad working and taking so many jobs to make ends meet. He even took a job in Baton Rouge to get work. I caught on fast that we didn't have a lot of money in our household, but what we had, we made it work, right?
Right. We made it work. Yeah. Both of us worked, and we always worked. And that was one of the things that we instilled in you. Before you even start thinking about a family, you need to have means to support that family. And that's what we wanted to make sure, that we had the means to support. And I don't really remember exactly how I told you you ain't gonna get no brother for Christmas, but I know that I did let you know that that's not something that Santa Claus is going to bring you.
You're listening to ICU. Eddie Robinson here with my mother, Stephanie Robinson, who lives in Macomb, Mississippi. And I wanted to find out, when I came out to you guys, how you all processed all of that. I know when I came out to y'all over the phone, you weren't too thrilled. Dad wasn't either. To this day, I struggle with the term gay. I didn't like using the word. I'm sure you and Dad didn't like using it as well. I knew growing up there were so many movies and TV shows that didn't care to use the word either. They would use these hand gestures and other names like queer and the word faggot, especially in the film Richard Pryor. Remember Which Way Is Up? I watched that film, back in, I guess it was the late 70s. Yeah. And every time that scene where he's yelling at them, saying that, right, he's not a faggot.
You think I'm a faggot? Faggot? Huh?
That put so much of an impression in my mind that I was really afraid to say anything to anyone about it. In the movie, they made it appear that it was such a derogatory thing to be that way. In 2007, when I had come out, I had got the impression that y'all really didn't think that it was true. Like somehow I'd come around and I was just experimenting, I guess. But do you know or recall how you and Dad were processing this news that your only son wasn't going to follow this typical straight path, that he was indeed different?
Yeah, that was really exactly how we felt. You were not going to follow the straight path, because everyone know that from the South, you're just straight up Baptist church. Straight up, that's the worst sin. There's no such thing as worst sin. All sins are sin. Now, on the phone conversation, the only thing that I remember is both of us looking at each other and just bawling. I mean, we just cried. We just could not understand. We thought this was just a phase that was going to go away. As a matter of fact, we prayed to God every night that he would change Eddie. But I know that God is able to do anything. Eddie didn't change. We accepted. We actually was more concerned with what the rest of the family was going to think. But we loved you then, and we love you now, and we're going to love this little Eddie. And he says that this baby is not going to be named Eddie, but I think he is. It was difficult, but it's Eddie's life, and that's what we have to accept.
Now, I know, Mama, something that I haven't mentioned to you as a result of this process, I've been diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression, and I'm actually on medication to treat all of this. You know, I was working for a sports radio station, and hearing so many homophobic comments was really getting to me and my nerves and, and my brain. And so I stood on the Brooklyn Queens Expressway one night after midnight, and I was about to scale a fence and jump off. And I was at my worst, darkest moments because family meant so much to me. And I remember when I came out, I didn't hear from you all for a long, long time. And I decided not to do it because I didn't want to destroy the life of the family who'd be involved in the accident. That wasn't their fault, which was really kind of a skewed way of thinking about that. But it was my best friend Peter at the time who really convinced me of how selfish of an act it was. And I had never heard of the word selfish being used in this context before to help someone stop thinking about killing themselves. And so, Mama, this has been a real mental roller coaster for me, but I'm getting stronger every day. And as I shared in the memorial recently with my Aunt Jackie, one of your eldest sisters, she sent me a text right before she passed away. And she basically said in that text that she would be there for me with whatever I needed. And that really gave me a peace of mind that my family really supported me through all of this. I just wanted you to know that you accepting me and being a part of my life and being a part of this kid's life is going to mean so much to me. And I thank you for that.
You're more than welcome. I know I don't have to say that. You know, I love you. I'm going to love Eddie. And I know your dad, if he was here, he would do the same. And yes, the family is really behind you. My sisters, I'm sure. My brothers, I'm sure. And we love you.
Thank you, Mom.
Welcome, Eddie.
You're listening to I See You. I'm Eddie Robinson.
It's I See You. I'm Eddie Robinson. For over 3 years, it's felt like I've been underwater without a lifeboat or safety vest. It's like I've been drowning. Drowning in anxiety, uncertainty, financial debt. I'm pursuing surrogacy as a single gay man. Now, despite no partner in the equation, no older siblings to confide in, the high risks, the high costs, I still won't give up. There's an unborn child that I'm fighting for. And it's a promise I made to my dad that he'd be a grandfather someday. And my dad was a warrior during his last months on Earth. After multiple amputations and a quadruple heart bypass, he died on my parents' 46th wedding anniversary. They had a strong bond, that Mississippi, Louisiana Cajun love that was beautiful and genuine. My dad taught me how to love unconditionally. And his genuine Mississippi, Louisiana spirit, I want that to live on. So what is surrogacy? All right, it's when a woman, a gestational carrier or surrogate, agrees to carry a pregnancy for another person. I provide the sperm, another donor woman provides me with her eggs. And through in vitro fertilization, or IVF, an embryo is created. That embryo then gets transferred to the surrogate. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? But with fertility, anything can happen, and the costs are no joke. But the problem is that there's very little affordable financial options or assistance available. So in my case, something miraculous happened around my birthday last year. One healthy, fertilized embryo successfully transferred to my gestational carrier. A rare moment, one-shotted love. And thanks to the work of an incredible surrogate agency, I connected with my GC, Whitney Crenshaw, and she loves being a surrogate.
Oh, I'd do it 100 times. I would do it 100 times over and over again.
She's currently pregnant with my baby. We taped a conversation with Whitney back in late March. The baby's due in August, so baby alert in full effect mode. Whitney lives in Prineville, Oregon. She has a husband and 2 beautiful children. I was curious to find out what led her to wanting to become a surrogate.
Well, my dad's adopted, and back in the 70s or so, this wasn't a thing. And my grandma could never have children of her own. And having your own child, it's something magical. I have a stepdaughter who I love very, very, very much, and I'd do anything for. But having your own child, it's just this different feeling.
Now, during our chat, I was curious to know more about the daily family chemistry. I mean, what's it like being inside the home of the Crenshaws when the mom of the household is carrying someone else's baby?
Well, let me tell you, when we start medication, it's a family event because I can't do my own shots. My husband has to do my shots for me. My 3-year-old feels like she needs a shot too. And then our 10-year-old closes her eyes. It's a family event because, you do it in the morning and you do it at night, and they hold my hands while I close my eyes and Joe gives me the shot. But the girls are very excited. I mean, our 3-year-old tells everybody my mommy's pregnant, and everybody kind of looks at me like, oh, you're having another one? Then I explain, oh no, I'm a surrogate. Our 10-year-old is excited when she gets to meet the baby. That's what she wants to do. She could care less that I'm pregnant right now. She's just like, I just want to see the baby when it comes out.
It's ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, and it's a conversation here with Whitney Crenshaw, my surrogate, who's currently pregnant with a baby of mine, a son. Yeah, I opted to know through early testing what the gender of the baby would be. Now, we wanted to get more into the conversation about how others have viewed this pregnancy. Keep in mind, surrogates are compensated for their service in carrying a child, but it's very hard, difficult work, and again, extremely expensive. Compensation is paid for by the intended parent, including legal costs, insurance, clinical visits, monthly allowances, prescription medication, ultrasounds, maternity clothes, the whole thing. And so, besides the finances, this process can build up tensions emotionally, mentally, financially, and even politically, especially when you're doing something like this for a man who's not only single, but he's also gay. And that alone can be stressful for others outside of the surrogacy circle to accept, much less support for that matter. And so, Whitney, I'm curious, how have you managed to deal with those who just don't agree with the notion of surrogacy for people of a certain sexual orientation? I mean, I understand there's been a little backlash that both you and your husband have experienced on some level, right?
Correct. It's been very interesting. I work at our church, and I had somebody come up to me and tell me I'm not a Christian because I'm having a baby for a gay person. And my husband's very protective of us, and he was just ready to just walk out like, I don't care what they're saying. And I said, at the end of the day, I am not God. I don't get to choose if you go to heaven or if you go to hell, because my job is to love everybody and have friendships with everybody. So if I choose to have babies for gay people or lesbians or straight couples, then that's my decision. and I'm going to love this baby when it comes out and have a relationship with Eddie and see this baby grow into this amazing family.
Amazing surrogates like Whitney are hard to find, and I'm so grateful to have been connected with her through the surrogate agency I'm currently with. I also asked Whitney to provide me with some insight on any characteristics or traits of the baby. What's been happening with that little one inside her stomach?
I've never had a baby so active. I feel him move all the time. So, runner, dancer, I don't know what it's gonna be. But I always cook the baby longer. I always deliver like past 41 weeks. I think this kid's gonna come right at the perfect time because he moves so much.
At the time of our taping, Whitney was about 20 weeks out, and as we speak, the countdown continues. The journey to the birth of Eddie's newborn makes its way to the world in August. We continue to hope for the absolute best. And thank Whitney Crenshaw and my surrogate agent for making this remarkable journey to fatherhood possible. You're listening to I See You. I'm Eddie Robinson. As we continue our discussion that's pretty original for public media, single gay men looking for a shot at becoming a father and dealing with limited, affordable options through surrogacy. That's pretty challenging for a single gay man, right? I mean, if you had a partner, it'd be different. Dual incomes, 2 paychecks, really contributing to building a solid financial foundation as a family unit, right? I mean, that's the ideal situation. But what happens when your partner dies? That's what happened to 54-year-old author Jacob Franzine of Austin. He and his husband went through surrogacy twice and had no idea how costly this process would end up being for them. But they were able to get through the ordeal and have 2 beautiful daughters as a result. But then 2 years ago, his husband passed away. And now, Jacob is having to parent 2 girls, ages 7 and 10, on his own. And I See You is so grateful to have Jacob here with us. Jacob Franzine, welcome to I See You.
Thank you, Eddie. It's good to be here.
We hear you and send our condolences and heartfelt thoughts to you and your family. Knowing this personal journey of yours is still pretty emotional. Thank you so much for showing such courage, showing such bravery, and for being a guest on our show to share with us your story.
Absolutely, and thank you for that.
What made you decide to go through surrogacy in the first place to start a family?
Well, it was an interesting road. When I met my husband, it was a time when we had both come out of a period of considering adopting as single gay men, because we had both wanted a family. And we had both landed on the fact that it just wasn't the right time for us, and it just became one of those back burner topics in our relationship. But as we were building this life together, we really did want to revisit the idea of becoming a family. And obviously there are a million different ways that you can become a family. We walked back through several of the ideas. Did we want to adopt? Did we want to foster to adopt? And then the idea of surrogacy came up, and the initial thought of it was, oh, that's too expensive. We're not going to pursue that. And then we did some research, and after doing some research, it started to look a little more affordable because there are so many different moving parts to a surrogacy journey. And one of the things that we did was decide to go with an agency. And when we launched into it, it was one of those things that he and I always felt like if we put our heads together, if we jumped into something together, we could make it happen. And so we took a leap of faith and we decided to move forward and ended up making it work out. There were some definite challenges that happened along the way, but one of the good things for us was because we had been lucky enough to get a very good agency, we were able to navigate those problems and get to the other side okay.
And when you say agency, this was one single agency that took care of the donor and the surrogate part, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Jacob, what was it like to go through the actual process on your end? You did it twice. Was it difficult or perhaps even different the second time around?
It was the same but different. We used the same agency. And it was interesting because The first time we went through, we were matched with an egg donor based on what we were looking for, and we couldn't have asked for someone better. And so when you go through the process, just being able to have the eggs fertilized and the number of embryos you get, that is all kind of up to nature. And we were lucky enough to get embryos for me and embryos for my husband so that we had 2 different sets. And our thought, because we were naive, was that we would try for twins. So we put an embryo from each of us in to begin with, and ultimately, nature takes its course, right? And so 1 embryo attached, and we ended up with our first daughter, who happens to be genetically mine. And we, of course, gave it some time, because once you become a new parent, you have a few things to do. And after giving it a little bit of time, we went back to the agency, but we had 1 embryo left from my husband that was viable. And so we went through the process of being able to start the journey with that embryo, but unfortunately that embryo did not take. And so we were out of eggs from our donor, and she had since left the program. One of the big plus sides of using this agency is they were able to approach the donor, because of course she remains anonymous, and explain the situation. And because we had successfully had a daughter, she was excited to go through the process again, specifically for our family, so that our children could be half-sisters biologically.
We're here speaking with Jacob Franzine of Texas. He's a single gay dad with 2 young children, ages 7 and 10. He went through surrogacy twice, but his family went through tragedy and loss with the passing of his husband, and now he's raising his 2 young daughters alone as a single parent. And Jacob, how have you dealt with the transition to single parenting after losing your husband?
Honestly, it depends on what day you ask me, because some days I will tell you it's going great, other days I will tell you not so great. You know, certainly the initial loss was a punch in the gut. It took us by surprise. We were very fortunate enough to have made long-term plans for contingencies should something happen to us before we ever started down the path of having children, so that if anything did happen, our children would be taken care of. But the transition piece has been from having someone that I lean on all the time to share the burden. Having them out of the equation, it means that I have to do everything on my own. So it has been eye-opening with how much I can actually take on, how much I can't, because I'm the guy who gets everyone to school. I'm the guy who gets everyone up and dressed and out the door. I'm the guy who gets everyone home, and I cook dinner, and I get dinner on the table. I get everyone bathed, and I get everyone tucked in. You take little things for granted when you have a partner, like just running down to the store to pick something up. I can't do that. If I run to the store, I have to get everybody dressed. I have to get them in the car, and a 10-minute errand can take me an hour. It changes your life in a sense of you have to really think ahead and plan ahead, because, for example, I can't meet a new client and jump off into a happy hour because I have to be with my children. And so it's been difficult, and I've had to make some shifts in how I work and what I do. This idea of trying to find some sort of balance between being able to provide for them as well as be there for them, because I both want to be a good provider and a good father. And I think sometimes we get pushed to one side or the other of that equation, and it's a real challenge, I think, to walk down the middle of that.
Jacob Franzine of Texas. He's a single gay dad with 2 beautiful young girls. I've seen pictures of them. They're so amazing. And they're so amazing to have you as their dad. Jacob's new book entitled No Proper Grief. Be on the lookout for that. It's a look into his personal story of loss and resilience, and it's likely to be released later this year. Jacob, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie.
Coming up, fertility's a multi-billion-dollar business where some surrogate agencies can charge up to $75,000 or more as compensation to the woman having the child. Is there any oversight from the federal government? And we check in with a mental health expert who's also gone through surrogacy. What kind of advice can he give a Black journalist who's been on medication and dealing with mounting costs of intended fatherhood when the baby hasn't even arrived yet? I'm Eddie Robinson. Find out more when ICU returns in a moment. You're listening to ICU. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson, and we're so grateful to have with us Barb Kalura, President and CEO of the advocacy group called Resolve, the National Infertility Association. Resolve helps to eliminate barriers, or at the very least, helps to offer up solutions to reduce the stress, to reduce the strain for those who are looking to start up families or looking to grow their own families. We're also joined by Joey Guzman Cuffle, who's out in San Diego. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist to also help guide us through this conversation about the mental challenges of getting through the process of surrogacy, especially if it relates to yours truly. I'm sharing a bit of my own personal journey. As a man going through surrogacy, an only child, my dad died at 67 years old. I promised him before he died that he'd be a granddad. But when you're single, a man who's not heterosexual, obstacles start to grow more and more. Roadblocks get in your way. But thanks to the both of you for taking the time and being a part of ICU. This is a special episode that I'm really grateful that all of you can be on our show and have this opportunity of answering these questions for us.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having me here, Eddie.
I've gone through a whirlwind of emotions as it relates to this surrogacy process. Most of my stress really has come from the financial spectrum. Barb, first question to you, as I love the name of your company, Resolve, because I do believe that there needs to be some form of resolution here for more affordable options for intended parents. Tell us more about what Resolve stands for and what your organization is doing to help address this issue.
Well, Eddie, this is so brave of you to share your story, and I'm so glad you are, because many, many, many more people need to hear and they need to understand the struggles and the barriers that we have right now in the United States for people to build their family. Well, I'm proud to represent Resolve, the National Infertility Association. We're a nonprofit patient advocacy organization started in 1974, and our aim is really to improve the lives of people who are struggling to build their family. And I love how you picked up on the name, because people go, what does it mean? What does it stand for? And then you start thinking about family building and you just want to be done. You want to be at your resolution. And so that's what it's about for us. We were founded really on the mental health aspects of this journey. The last several years, though, we have been very, very focused on advocacy at the federal level in Washington, D.C., and at the state level, because there are a lot of barriers for people to build their family. And then we've also been very focused on employer coverage and how do we look at this as, instead of you have a medical benefit or you have maybe a couple $1,000s for an adoption benefit, how do employers build family building friendly benefits? What does that look like for all the different ways that people can build their family today? So those are all the things we do. We're super proud to be part of a group of organizations that changed the law in New York last year in 2020. New York State had banned people from doing surrogacy. How you are choosing to build your family, Eddie, they said, not here, can't do it in New York. It's against the law. So we were very proud to work for many years to change that law, and now it's completely legal in the state of New York. So that's the kind of work that we do, as well as a big part is insurance coverage.
That's really good to know, and congrats to Resolve and all the other organizations that were very instrumental in that. And you mentioned the work benefits, because I noticed that my insurance doesn't cover this. I have work-related benefits, but there are no clauses that specifically address the notion of men who may be single or part of the gay and lesbian community. They do not have any kind of fertility coverage for me. And add insult to that injury is the fact that many fertility clinics may not even accept a person's insurance. And I found that to be mind-blowing. Has Resolve seen any trends as to whether we're seeing any kind of expansion of fertility coverage within the business sector? Are more companies starting to rethink work benefits nowadays to include men, to include fertility coverage for those who may be LGBTQ?
They are, and we are seeing certainly a trend to employers adding more coverage for IVF, adding more coverage for donor egg, donor sperm, surrogacy, but it's just the tip. And so we have some companies that are leading the charge. These are going to be larger companies, and they're going to really look at it holistically. And a lot of it is because employees have raised their voice and have said, hey, what exists here doesn't really work for me, and can we do better? And we recently did a survey of employers, and one of the things that they told us is part of the reason why these benefits exist is because employees asked for it. So I want people to hear that. One of the companies that we recently worked with was Frito-Lay, and they not only are providing benefits for people to do a surrogacy, and I think it's $1 benefit that they're offering, but they have educational programming for employees on, gosh, how do I even do this? What are all the things that I need to be thinking about for the LGBTQ community within Frito-Lay? And to have an employer have like a lunch and learn on, hey, you need to build your family through surrogacy or donor egg? Come on Thursday at noon. So I jokingly say that, but this is actually happening. So That's what you want to see. You want to see those companies leading the charge, and then employees talking about it and saying, hey, this is important, and right now this doesn't work for me.
And just know, folks who are listening, there are some resources that are out there, but they're highly competitive in seeking out that assistance. Organizations like Men Having Babies, Gift of Parenthood, Baby Quest. But the financial resources and the grant money are extremely limited. Surely there are discounts that they may be offering, but we're talking procedures that cost $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 here. And you would think that more resources would be offered up for lower income families or for single gay dads to help offset costs. But there's only a certain handful of resources that are available, added to the notion that there are other families who may be in worse shape from a health standpoint and have tried for years and years and years to attempt this journey, but yet you realize that those individuals, those families are also in need. So that legislative piece, Barb, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Well, I also want to say surrogacy is used certainly in situations where you have gay parents, but you also have it in situations where the soon-to-be mom, she might not be healthy enough to carry a pregnancy. Maybe she doesn't have a uterus. So there's many different reasons why somebody might do surrogacy. But here's the really sad thing about the way our health insurance benefits are done. Surrogacy is where a woman is going to carry the pregnancy. She's not genetically linked, but the medical procedures are done on her. But health insurance goes with the person, the covered life. So let's say you work somewhere and they do have IVF benefits, or you work in a state that has mandated insurance. That doesn't mean the gestational carrier, your surrogate, that IVF process is going to be covered because it's for you. And you're going to say, I can't do it. So I am going to work with this person who's going to do it. And the insurance company says, too bad, they're not a covered life.
Jeez. Well, that legislative piece as it relates to the definition of infertility is something I'd really like you to address, Barb. But I have to get Joey into this mix here because I'm really grateful that you're here. And I've been diagnosed by my doctor from suffering from severe anxiety and depression, currently on medication. And this is all intense because it started when I began this journey 3 years ago. And I don't like to take these medications because I'm not a fan of the side effects, but I've noticed just sharing that with certain individuals, it tends to kind of go through one ear and out the other. I recently had a conversation with a lawyer that's involved in my process. Absolutely no empathy whatsoever. I read an article from Columbia University that said that in the year 2000, a survey conducted by the Mental Health Foundation found that 44% of adults with mental illnesses reported being discriminated against or dismissed by their physician. Nearly 2 decades later, this trend still prevails. And it said something about reports consistently indicating that individuals living with mental illnesses feel that doctors disrespect them, judge their credibility as they describe their physical symptoms to them, and or ignore their concerns. How come mental health and those who suffer from it aren't really taken seriously until it's too late? you have this sort of ingrained stigma against those who suffer mental illness, especially the African American community. I grew up in a world of take it to the Lord in prayer, okay? No therapists, none of that. But it's really clear to me that this is so real, mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely, Eddie. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that the mental health piece is very important in bringing awareness and chiseling away at the stigma at a society level and also just cultural level, because I think that culture and society play a big part as to why mental health assistance has a negative stigma, and so people shy away from that. But the truth is that sometimes we all need a little help. And I think that by being able to speak to a counselor or a therapist is a way of processing what we're experiencing and experiencing empathy. You just mentioned speaking to either a lawyer or even the doctor kind of goes in one ear and it comes out the other. And I think as therapists, we definitely feel for our clients. So I want to say that when you go in to see a therapist, we're definitely listening and we're there to walk alongside you in your journey. And I'm there with you. I'm hearing you, I'm seeing you, and I'm there to be supportive and provide you the help that you need so that you can get to the point where you want to be.
And I understand you've also gone through surrogacy yourself, correct? Just briefly tell us about your journey in general. Did you go through these kinds of roadblocks and stress and strain going through your own process?
Absolutely. Thinking back to it, I can't believe how much stress and anxiety I was experiencing because, like you said, at first you don't know where to start. And once you're starting to gather information, then you're like, wow, can I really do this? Because it doesn't matter how financially stable you can be, it's still very expensive for gay men to be able to go through this process in building their family. And so there's a lot to think about. You have to think about what clinic you're going to be using and what doctors are the best for you and surrogacy agency and their fees and everybody else's fees. And then thinking, how am I going to be able to do this? Because there aren't really any payment plans. I think that with agencies and clinics, they all kind of want some large lump sum up front. And so that makes it really difficult for a lot of us. Sometimes you have to really think about it, and people actually wait years to save up money to start their building process. And so then there's other types of stresses that come along aside from the financial piece, but it's also timing. Some of us may have our biological clock ticking or whatever that may look like for us because of our culture and the pressures in our family, being gay or being a person of color, being gay and wanting to be a single parent, all of these things you start to think about, and it's just a lot for someone to handle. And so all of these things can really take a toll on your mental health, not just as an individual, but even if you're in a relationship, it can also take a toll on your relationship. There's so many different aspects that this family building journey, because it's so expensive and sometimes so unattainable, that it really impacts mental health. And so it is important when you're getting into this process to understand that talking to a counselor or someone who's maybe already gone through this process to be super important so that you can start to put the pieces in order, because that I think helps. And being a part of a support group, because you can always learn from somebody else's journey. I found that to be very helpful. So I found a support group very early on. And through that support group, I found an individual that was located in my area in San Diego. And I reached out and I was like, hey, listen, I'm here. I don't know what to do. How do you go about this? And they were able to share some information with me that really was helpful for me and my spouse.
Well, I knew that this process would be a lot of money, but the cost as you go deeper and deeper into this procedure, more and more and more money is needed. I didn't realize that the cost would become so astronomical. That's what I didn't anticipate. That financial strain is what's causing a majority of my stress. So what's driving up the cost? I mean, many of these clinics and agencies can establish their own prices, their own compensation levels for donors and surrogates without little or any regulation. There are countries that ban surrogacy, but also countries that allow surrogacy but don't compensate surrogates. Those intended parents reimburse the expenses to those surrogates. But why is it so expensive here in the United States and the costs just keep increasing?
The agencies and the women who are offering to be gestational carriers are getting a lot of money from people outside the United States where it is illegal, and that is driving up sadly, a huge amount of the cost for Americans, because the intended parents will come to the United States, they will work with a gestational carrier in the US and pay that woman a lot of money. It's a sad supply and demand, and you are being squeezed out, as is every other American who wants to be an intended parent. We have a problem. And so if other countries legalize surrogacy and they could do it in their own countries, they wouldn't have to come to the US, and we'd probably have a very level playing field.
And it impacts the cost for people like me who see all these fluctuations of agency fees, donor fees, and it gets really intense. I did have sperm, which miraculously fertilized an egg to produce one amazingly strong, healthy embryo. But at the end of the day, Barb, I'm still infertile because I'm a man. I can't have a child. So is there any legislation or something happening to address these kinds of inclusion issues where my accountant even showed me when I was filing my taxes, I couldn't claim any of the expenses. Tax deductions are being denied when I've had to cough up thousands upon thousands upon thousands of out-of-pocket dollars. None of that I could report or file. Are there states currently looking into these measures of redefining what it means to truly be infertile?
Yeah, these are things that cross federal law and regulation, cross state law and regulation. And so there are several organizations, Resolve being one of them, who realize that there are far too many barriers. And so how do we really impact the legislation and the regulation in such a way that all of those barriers don't exist? Nobody right now can claim surrogacy costs on their taxes. That doesn't make any sense to any of us. So how do we work with the Treasury Department and IRS to change that? Do we need to go to Congress? What are the state laws that are impacting this right now? How do we make surrogacy open in other countries so that we don't need to worry about people having to go across border for reproduction? So there are many layers. Eddie, I hate to say this, our field is really underfunded from an advocacy perspective. And so we are doing everything we can with the limited resources we have. But if there's a listener out there who's saying, we got to fix this, hey, let's bring it on, because we can change this for people forever.
If you can answer this for me, Joey, I would really, really be grateful for hearing me out here. But it's painful for me as a single gay Black man who's an only child going through this process. Someone who doesn't have a partner to rely on, especially as it relates to sharing the financial strain of staying on top of the costs associated with surrogacy. Someone with underlying conditions, battling this global pandemic, dealing with the death of my dad, the death of an aunt who was going to be my support person, that village to help raise my kid with my mom, seeing images and experiencing this level of social unrest with the death of George Floyd, the incidents of what's happened in parts of Minnesota, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, all of this just kind of bubbles up in a journalist like me. I've been pulled over. I've been profiled. As a junior in high school by a cop in Mississippi, my vehicle was searched. I did nothing, shaking with fear. What kind of advice would you offer up to someone like me who's just trying to stay strong, who wants a child extremely badly as a gay man, but has this difficulty of just stepping out of their home and trying to live their life simply? What does it take to keep this train on the track in the midst of all this uncertainty and stress?
Wow, that is a lot. That is definitely a lot. And what I would say is, if you have that glimmer of hope, I think holding on to that hope and also trying to identify that support system that can be around you. Now, I know that you mentioned that you've had losses, people that were a part of your support system that you were counting on. I think it's just in general for all people, but I've heard it very much in the gay community where they say, we have our family and then we have our chosen family. And I think that even reaching out to that chosen family so that you can continue to have that support system from another group of people that you can talk to about all of these things that are going on in the world and with your situation. I think that having that outlet can be very, very helpful to your mental health. And it also just allows you to continue to strengthen your bonds and relationships and build communities with people. And so I would say allowing yourself to be heard and be seen.
Eddie, I would just say focus on your vision of your life with your child. And every day, find the minute, or if it's 3 seconds, just focus on whatever that thing is. And I know that there's mounting stresses and pressures on you, but hang in there. I know that doesn't sound very much, but focus on that vision of your life as a parent, as a dad. Look, this is why Resolve exists, is because this journey sucks. You can't do it alone. And that's what I tell people. Don't even try. I'm sorry, you're going to fail, and then you're going to be in a pit of despair. Build your entourage, build your tribe, build your support network, whatever that looks like.
And that babe, you know it, Barb. I mean, that babe is my inspiration. That's what's keeping me on that track, is to know that August 10th, that's the due date. That's what's really holding me together. Thanks to the both of you hearing my story, trying to shed some light, some sort of hope for this episode. I'm hoping that it resonates with someone, to find some sense of understanding to get through all of this. You know, it should be my right to do this, not a privilege. And I thank you both for being a guest on ICU. Thank you. And that's this episode of ICU. Thanks to our intensive care unit, technical director, Todd Holzlander, producer, editor, Shannon McCurchie, editor, Mark DeClaudio, sound designer, Dave McDermott. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson. Thanks so much for listening.